Welcome to PK Woodworking, everybody. As you can see, I've got some new swag from some of my friends. And today is episode 8 of the shop build, and we're going to talk about electrical, low voltage, and air, and talk about why I'm kind of doing what I'm doing. It's all finished at this point, except for what I have to do after they put in the drywall ceiling. But I'm going to kind of show you piece by piece why I did what I did and kind of explain it. And in this particular case, I'm going to say straight up now that I am not a licensed electrician. I try to act like I play one sometimes on YouTube. But if you've got any feedback for me about things that might have been done incorrectly, I'm open. Please give it to me. Let's go ahead and take a look at the panels first. Okay, this is the main panel. This was installed by the electricians that were part of the contractor to build the actual shop. And it had to be, first of all, I wanted 200 amp service no matter what, but they had to actually run circuits ahead of time for it to pass code. So some of the top circuits, the first 4 20 amp breakers, and then 2 double 40 amp breakers were installed by that team. After there's a gap you can see, and that's because I think they broke a couple of tabs inside of the box. No big deal. It's got way more space than I need for any of this stuff. So that's fine. So I just want to say that I'm somewhat limited by what they did originally, and they used MC cable for everything to wire, which is great, cool. Definitely something I worked through while I was wiring the shop, and it's going to be something I have to delve into when I redo the lighting, which I need to pull down the existing 4 lights in here right before the guy comes to do the drywall, and then I'll scab on or use that circuit that they made, that 20 amp lighting circuit, to do my lights that are going to go up in the ceiling. Okay, I'm going to get you in a little closer. So this 125 amp breaker right here is for the Phase Perfect 15 horsepower phase converter, and then we've got a 40 amp for a mini split, and then I've got 20 amp for a 220. I've got a 30 amp for the other mini split. I've got a 30 amp for another 220 circuit, and I've got 2 more 20 amps for other 220 circuits. And then these 2 are 2 circuits for plugs, separate circuits for plugs. I'll show you how they alternate as they go. This is my AV circuit that's right here. That's just for the audio video stuff. And then this is another 20 amp. That's another set of just regular plugs that are, I split apart, and I'll show you why. And then I've got 2 15 amp breakers down here at the bottom, and these are for the fans and then for the cleaners that are going to be in the ceiling, both which draw pretty much no power. Okay, now I'm going to give you a combo shot of the 2 panels I have. So the center panel is just a bunch of extra Cat 6 right now. That's all going to be terminated so that I can run Cat 6 from the main house in here. But that 125 amp breaker that's on the main panel goes outside to the actual phase converter that's outside in an NEMA 3 enclosure, R enclosure, excuse me. And then that comes in from that into this panel right here. So you can see in the panel that I've got 4 gauge coming in for the 3 phases. By the way, this is all turned off right now, so there's no power here. And then we're actually running 1/0 from that panel over there with 125 amp, the 125 amp through to the actual phase converter. And then I have 7 machines that run on 3-phase now, and one of them I may not run on 3-phase because one of them, if I can't get it to work the way I want it to work, then I won't have it anymore. I won't bring it in here. But long story short is I've got a separate breaker for every single machine. I don't daisy chain any of them off the top of each other. That's how I want to do it. I could have probably done it differently, but I chose to do it this way. I've got for my sander, for my joiner planer combo, for my table saw, for my shaper, for my new sander that I've got, for the dust collector, and then this last one, which is the one I was telling you about that I may or may not use going down the road. But those are the panels, and then I'm going to back up and show you kind of what I did after that. This is a view of one wall, and I want to give you a shot of what I was talking about before. So these lines represent basically 48.5 inches. So from here on up across will be a full 4x8 sheet of plywood, and then from here below will be a 4x8 sheet of plywood. In between here is going to be this other 2 foot sheet of plywood that will go across, where all of the plugs, air, everything will land. And if something should go wrong in the future, like one of my airlines doesn't hold air, or if I need to wire something extra or do something more, then I can take out that 2 foot section and put in some extra cable if I need to, or move something if I need to. Paul, what do you mean if you have to move something, you have this 2 foot section? What's the point? Why wouldn't you move it now? Well, I have some Stanley Vidmar cabinets. I'm going to give an example. They're tall, they're big, and I'm not exactly sure where they're going to go, but I will figure it out after the ceiling's done and all that's put in. And so if I need to move something within this section, I can move it and just, if I have to, change that 2 foot section of plywood to make it work. And so that's the whole gist of this around the whole entire shop. Paul, if you know you're gonna have to do that, why wouldn't you just put conduit on the outside of the walls like everybody else does? Well, I've done that before, and it's limiting for me. Like if I want to mount something on the wall, I've got lots of different accessories for my machines that need to, mount on the wall and whatever. If I put those there, then I get a different accessory I need to mount on the wall. The conduit's always in the way. If I want to put a cabinet up, the conduit's always in the way. So for me, this is a way for me to kind of future-proof this in advance. As you can see, I've got 20 duplexes across the whole shop, and they're on 4 different circuits, so that I never would overload any one of them. And I've got so many of those already located in here that I don't imagine that I'm going to ever need to do anything different or add anything from a 120 volt perspective. From a 240 volt perspective, I only have a couple machines now that run off 240 volts. I've got a bandsaw and I've got my air compressor. Other than that, everything else is 3-phase. So the 3-phase stuff, they're big enough machines they can only go in some place. So 3 of those drops come from the ceiling and they're already pre-wired, so I can move them. The beauty of those ones that come from the drops from the ceiling is that if I need to move them a little bit, it's not a big deal if that cord kind of sways over to the side or back and forth. And I just would prefer it because I think it just looks better in general to not have all that wall acne, which I like to call it, which is conduit. Now, some people love it. I'm not a hater, it's your shop. But for me, I don't want that in my shop. I'd rather have the stuff buried behind the wall, and that gives me much more space to use those walls going forward. Okay, what the heck is going on here, you might ask? All of this wire right here is the 4 separate lines for the 4 circuits I'm gonna have for my lights above me. So I'm gonna have a total of 16 8-foot LEDs that are 100 watts a piece. So each switch is going to control 4 of those lights, and they're going to be in sections across the shop based on where I work. There's a plug up there that's going to be for one section that will be for all of the machines that are down here, which are the table saw, etc. Then there'll be one in the middle up here. That'll be 4 more of them up here, so that they'll be there for the sanders, etc. And then 4 more in the middle that'll be for the other half of the sander and the shaper, which is really important. And then at the very front, I'll have another 4 that'll be for, when I'm doing hand stuff, hand tool stuff, what have you. Okay, Paul, back to this. You never explained this. Okay, so that switch down there, that's the lowest thing that I have in the whole shop. Those 2 switches, one controls the outside lights and one controls the 4 lights that were put in when they first got the sign off. So I'm not going to use the 4 lights on the inside, but of course I'll use the outside light. But I'm going to use the circuit to power my lights. So I've got all these lights up here, and when I take down the lights on the ceiling, I will repurpose this with a much bigger box, And I'm not sure if I'm going to have double switches or not. You can see I've got all these switches all laying here ready to go, or if I'm going to use the ones like I used last time. Either way, that's where that'll be. And then it'll also be the fan control and also the switch for the filters also. Now I have a good friend, I consider at least, he's a good friend, who I went to see his shop, and he had this really cool thing for his phase converter where when it was left on, that it would actually have a light above it so you wouldn't forget that you leave it on. So this switch is actually just a little two conductor thing that is low voltage that goes up and over to the phase converter that turns it from standby to on. And I believe I can just put a light in series with that. I'm going to call Phase Perfect on Monday and find out if that does work. If that does, piece of cake, I'll have a little light there, and the switch will be able to put it in standby or in regular mode. Let's talk a little audio video. So if you know my old shop, I have a cabinet that I put all my audio video equipment in. There's going to be more in it this time, so hopefully it all fits. But it mounts on the wall, and it's enclosed, and it has a hinge on the side, and it opens up to let you see what's inside of it and work on it, etc. So these are the home run for all the wires. So now every single speaker wire is in here. The Cat 6 wires in here, the HDMI cables in here, everything's ready to go. And then we have a ton of power out here, bunch of power here, so I don't have to run a bunch of power outlets inside of the cabinet because I think it's going to be absorbed with everything that's going to be inside there at this point. As you may be able to tell here, I've done a little reframing now. That's where the center speaker goes. And then the left and the right are on the wall. You might be able to see that or not. But then I've got a Cat 6 to go to the TV. I've got HDMI, and then I've got the speaker wires all coming down into the base where the speaker wires are going to be. The lighting in here isn't great, but let me show you a little something that is one thing that can be somewhat concerning, which is the air that I put in. So I used Max Line, 1/2 inch air line in my shop. I did the same thing in my last shop, and it did not leak. It was fantastic. It was very easy to run and zero maintenance whatsoever. The challenge for me here is that I've got them in the walls, and they're outside of those areas I told you about. They go up into the ceiling, and I have 9 T's that are in the ceiling, which are all places where it could leak. And I hope that I did a good job of tightening them all, or I'm going to be, putting stuff on the outside of the wall where I don't want to. As it is currently, I have 7 of the outlets in the walls for air. I have 1 above my joiner planer combo, which it uses air to raise the table. I have 1 above the wide belt sander because the wide belt sander uses that to track and to tension the belt. And then I have 1 for a reel that's going to come down from the ceiling that I'm going to install up there. So between all of that, I got a lot of air in all the places that I'd hopefully need it in the shop. And the whole idea here is that this is overkill so that I don't have to go back and redo it again. Hopefully I've done my, due diligence ahead of time to make sure I wouldn't have to redo it ahead of time. Now, hopefully it's not raining right now, and I can show you what the main panel looks like. So we just got a small break in the weather here. So this is my new main panel, and you can kind of see that it's separated now, that there's a sub panel for 200 amps to the garage, and there's the main breaker for 200 amps to the rest of the house. So these are the breakers to the house. I have a sub panel inside the garage that's going to change pretty drastically as soon as everything comes out of there, and probably doesn't need to be 125 amps anymore, but I don't know, there's a need to change it. Again, it's a 400 amp panel, and it splits for 200 to the shop and 200 for the house. One thing that I'm happy I did this for is that I just realized that the cable going to the sander, I did not cable staple within a certain amount of space to the box, and it's sticking way too far out. So I have to address that. So a good thing that we're doing this. And if I think I'm being critical about this myself, I think there's a lot of places where I made the conduit slightly shorter than maybe it should have been, and I didn't attach the conduit where I should have next to the boxes because I kind of made them shorter. Now the fact that it's conduit, and I'm probably never going to be able to put a screw through the conduit, that's at least my hope. Yeah, I know that it's not probably perfectly to code, but anyways, if that's the only thing I got going on, then hopefully I'm solid. But if you got anything you see, please feel free to put it in the comments. Just for S&G, let's turn on the three-phase. You may hear it make a little noise now. Then I come over here. And now it's on. So now I can run a three-phase machine. I could turn on the sander if I wanted to. And when I want to turn it back into standby, it's as easy as walking back over here. Right before I leave the shop, turn it off, and now it's in standby again. So what's next? I'm going to call the gentleman to schedule some time for him to do the ceiling. As soon as the drywall is done in the ceiling, he's going to obviously cut out all the holes for all the speakers. He's going to cut out around all of the outlets, make sure that the air pipes are poking through, all that kind of fun stuff. And they're not going to put a texture, it's just going to be mud and tape. And then I'll spray the ceiling white. And then that's probably after that you'll see a next video from me. And then we can start getting deep into insulation. So I'm going to insulate the walls. I'm going to have someone blow in the insulation in the ceiling. I do have to do one more thing before I can get the person who's going to do the drywall in. I need to put in 2 access areas into the ceiling, into the attic space. I'll never go up there, but I need to put 2 access panels up there so that they can blow in the insulation in the ceiling. One of them is going to go right in front of the garage. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to put the other one yet. Really don't want to have it all the way down at the other end. We'll see how it all works out. Anyways, thanks again for showing up to my videos and watching them, and I really appreciate it. And we're moving along, and hopefully I can start making some sawdust and showing you what I got. So anyways, thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.